Have you ever pondered on the intricate diplomatic dance India is performing in the face of the Ukraine-Russia conflict? As we delve into the depths of this geopolitical conundrum, it's vital to understand the historical ties that bind India and Russia. A friendship that spans decades, marked by significant economic support and strategic cooperation. India has been a steady consumer of Russian oil and natural gas, a relationship that it continues to uphold, even amidst the current conflict. Refusing to impose sanctions on Russia, India has chosen a path of neutrality, a tightrope walk, if you will, between its traditional ally and the global community. This was evident during a recent meeting of the G20 nations in Bengaluru, where India, in a bid to soften the narrative, suggested referring to Russia's invasion of Ukraine as a challenge or crisis, not a war. However, the rest of the G20, in a joint press release, stuck to calling the conflict a war. Now let's turn our attention to a recent diplomatic development. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba made a visit to New Delhi. This was more than a courtesy call. It was a strategic maneuver, an attempt to strengthen ties with India and seek its support in ending Russia's war. Notably, India, while refraining from criticizing Russia, has been proactive in its engagement with Western powers, aiming to reduce its dependence on Russian arms and technology. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in his conversations with both Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin, has emphasized the need for diplomacy, subtly indicating India's willingness to contribute to peace efforts and perhaps even mediate between Russia and the West. With the world watching, India's diplomatic stance in this conflict is under intense scrutiny. Will it be able to maintain its delicate balancing act without tripping over the lines drawn by international politics? Only time will tell. Moving on to the recent G20 summit, where India's approach to the conflict was distinctly noticeable. The summit, held in Bengaluru, saw India making an intriguing diplomatic move. The country attempted to persuade the G20 nations to refer to Russia's invasion of Ukraine not as a war, but as a challenge or a crisis. This linguistic subtlety was a clear attempt by India to moderate the escalating tensions and encourage dialogue over hostility. However, this proposal was met with resistance. The joint press release by the G20 countries continued to label the attack on Ukraine as a war. Despite this setback, India remained undeterred in its diplomatic efforts. It refrained from blaming any party for the violence and continued to strengthen its relationship with Russia. This was evident in India's economic support for Russia, refusal to impose sanctions, and continued purchase of Russian oil and natural gas. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's stance at the summit was also noteworthy. He emphasized the unbreakable friendship between India and Russia, a bond that has weathered many global storms. However, it wasn't a blind allegiance. India expressed its reluctance to support further sanctions on Russia during the G20 meetings, highlighting its unique position in this conflict. India's approach at the summit was a clear testament to its diplomatic dance, a dance that requires a delicate balance between old alliances and new realities. It's a dance between maintaining ties with a long-standing ally like Russia, while also acknowledging the need for peace and dialogue in the face of escalating global tensions. The G20 summit was a clear reflection of India's delicate balancing act in this global crisis. So, what does the future hold for India's diplomacy in this conflict? As we move into an era of uncertainty, it's clear that India is navigating a diplomatic tightrope. On one hand, it's strengthening its ties with Western powers, demonstrating a willingness to engage more deeply on the global stage. This is a marked shift from India's traditionally non-aligned stance, and it's a move that reflects the changing dynamics of global politics. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been in direct conversations with both Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin. Modi's emphasis on diplomacy underlines India's belief in dialogue as a means to resolve conflict. This highlights India's potential role as a mediator between Russia and the West. Simultaneously, India is also looking to reduce its dependence on Russian arms and technology. This is a significant step, considering that Russia has been a long-term supplier of military hardware to India. But this move towards diversification is a sign of India's desire to reduce its strategic vulnerability. However, all of this doesn't mean that India is ready to sever its ties with Russia. The relationship between the two countries has deep historical roots, and India has been careful to maintain this friendship, even as it expands its diplomatic horizons. India's diplomatic dance is a complex one, balancing historical friendships with future strategies. It's a performance that requires a delicate touch, a keen understanding of global politics, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. In the midst of this geopolitical quagmire, India's diplomatic dance continues, with each move watched by a global audience. The world will be watching as India continues to navigate its way through this diplomatic maze, making choices that will shape its future and influence the global balance of power. Let's dive deeper into this intricate diplomatic dance that India is performing. As we've explored, India's diplomatic strategy is a balancing act of maintaining historical ties and fostering new alliances. Its relationship with Russia, while historically rich, is facing new challenges as India seeks to diversify its strategic dependencies. On the other hand, India's growing engagement with Western powers indicates a shift in its diplomatic stance. But it's not just about Russia and the West. India is also actively engaging with countries in the Indo-Pacific and Middle East, broadening its diplomatic canvas. India's diplomatic dance is not an easy one. It has to manage its relationships with major powers, while also maintaining its strategic autonomy. This requires a careful calibration of interests, values, and objectives. This delicate diplomatic dance, if performed successfully, could position India as a significant player in the global arena, influencing the direction of international politics. However, the stakes are high, and any misstep could have serious repercussions for India's strategic interests. As we move forward, it will be fascinating to see how India manages this diplomatic balancing act. Will it be able to maintain its non-alignment while engaging more deeply with the global community? Will it be able to walk this diplomatic tightrope successfully, or will it stumble? Only time will tell. For now, India's diplomatic dance continues, with the world watching every step. And as always, we'll be here to analyze and understand these global shifts. So stay tuned for more analysis on global affairs. And remember, in this complex world, knowledge is power. So keep learning, stay curious, and keep watching.